Have you ever looked around and felt the world moving too fast? Everyone chasing something they can't even name. You see faces glued to trends, voices echoing what's already been said. But somewhere inside, a quieter voice asks, what if I stopped following? What if I led by standing still? Stay with me. Let's explore the strength found in not belonging. As we step into the first chapter, imagine standing in the middle of a crowd that moves like a single restless creature. Everyone hurries toward something, an image, an approval, a mirage. Their eyes flicker between screens. Their laughter echoes in patterns that feel rehearsed. You can feel the current pulling at you too, whispering that to belong you must move the same way. But beneath that noise, there's a quieter truth pressing against your chest, the longing to stop, to think, to reclaim your own rhythm. That's where the Stoic path begins. Not in rebellion for its own sake, but in the decision to question what everyone else accepts without thought. Now imagine this: a marketplace filled with noise, each merchant shouting that their truth is the only one that matters. That's what modern life feels like. Trends scream, opinions multiply. Yet very few stop to ask, why am I shouting too? Seneca once warned, the crowd is the greatest threat to reason. He knew that the danger of following the herd is not just losing direction, it's losing yourself. The Stoic doesn't walk away because he hates the crowd. He steps aside because he values clarity more than comfort. To question what everyone else follows blindly isn't arrogance. It's self-respect. I remember once standing at a friend's gathering, everyone buzzing about the latest thing to buy, the next show to love, the next outrage to post. I listened and nodded, but something in me recoiled. Their voices carried excitement, yet their eyes looked tired. That's when I understood. Noise can sound alive while being completely empty. The Stoics teach us to pause when the world rushes, to look at the current before stepping in. Because speed without direction is just chaos disguised as progress. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" That simple question is a sword cutting through illusion. Before you join a movement, a trend, a conversation, ask it. Before you buy, before you post, before you judge, ask it again. Most of what we chase is not necessary, it's only familiar, and the familiar is seductive because it feels safe. But the Stoic seeks truth, not safety. He knows that following the crowd may protect you from loneliness, but it will never protect you from emptiness. There was a time when I too wanted to belong. I adjusted my tone, my clothes, even my opinions to fit the unspoken code of acceptance. It worked for a while. People smiled, invited me, praised me. Yet at night, I felt the quiet shame of someone who had traded authenticity for applause. That shame was my teacher. It whispered what Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." The moment I stopped fearing disapproval, I started thinking clearly again. Freedom doesn't come when others stop judging you. It comes when you stop needing their permission to exist. Look around. Most people live like reflections of reflections. They borrow their confidence from trends, their opinions from headlines, their values from what's currently applauded. It's easier to follow a script than to write your own. But a Stoic knows that imitation is the slow death of the mind. To question is to awaken. To stand apart is to begin seeing. You don't need to shout to be different. You just need to pause where others rush, to think where others react, to observe where others compete to speak. Picture a river in flood. The crowd moves like that water, fast, noisy, destructive, yet below the surface the stones remain still. They have no need to move because they are grounded. The Stoic chooses to be that stone. Still doesn't mean passive. It means anchored in reason, not carried by impulse. When the crowd changes direction tomorrow, you will not have to. You'll already know where you stand. The truth is, questioning trends often isolates you. People will call you distant, arrogant, even cold. But their discomfort is only fear disguised as opinion. They fear what they can't control. They fear the mirror that your independence holds up to their own conformity. Remember Marcus again. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. You don't owe the world agreement. You owe it awareness. There's a quiet power in saying no when everyone says yes. It doesn't sound heroic. It doesn't earn applause. But that's exactly why it's powerful. It's untouched by vanity. Each refusal to follow without thought is a small act of liberation. You stop being a leaf tossed by the wind and become the tree that bends but does not break. And when others finally tire of the noise, they'll look for that stillness and find you there. So start small. The next time you feel pressure to join the latest rush, pause. Observe your own reaction. Ask whether it comes from conviction or from the fear of missing out. Choose clarity over conformity. The world doesn't need another echo. It needs one more steady voice willing to think. In the end, questioning the crowd isn't about superiority. It's about integrity. It's not about isolation. It's about alignment with reason, with virtue, with the part of you that refuses to be hypnotized by noise. When you begin to think this way, you'll notice something subtle. The world slows down around you. The current weakens. You can see again. And that's when true independence begins. Not in shouting that you are different, but in knowing quietly that you no longer need to be the same. From here, we move deeper into the art of letting go of approval itself, the invisible chain that keeps the crowd together and the Stoic apart. Moving into the second chapter, imagine standing in front of a mirror that reflects not your face, but the thoughts that drive you. You see flashes of approval, likes, compliments, nods of validation, and behind them, the quiet truth. How easily we let the opinions of others shape who we become. We crave to be seen, to be accepted, to be told that we are enough. But the Stoic knows the need for approval is the subtlest form of slavery. You trade your peace for the illusion of belonging, and in doing so, you lose the ability to truly see yourself. I once met a man who lived for applause. Every decision he made, what he wore, where he went, what he said, was a performance designed for admiration. He was loved but never known, respected but never free. One day, after a public humiliation, he came to me and said, "I feel invisible." I told him the truth. He wasn't invisible. He had just been living in other people's eyes for so long that when they looked away, he disappeared. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not the opinion of others that troubles us, but our own opinion about their opinion. That's where the chain lies, inside your own judgment. We think approval feeds us, but it starves the soul. Because once you depend on it, you start chasing it like air. And when the applause fades, as it always does, you begin gasping for meaning. The Stoic refuses to live this way. He seeks strength not from the crowd's reaction, but from the harmony between his actions and his principles. Approval is borrowed. Integrity is owned. There was a time in my own life when silence felt unbearable. I wanted people to notice me, to validate my effort, to say I mattered. But one evening, sitting alone after another day of seeking praise that never came, I remembered a line from Epictetus. If you wish to be loved, love virtue. Not charm, not fame, virtue. Because when you live by virtue, you stop performing. You simply are. That night, I wrote a sentence in my journal that I've never forgotten. Better to be unknown and free than known and owned. The need for approval is often disguised as kindness. We tell ourselves we're being considerate, polite, humble. But if our kindness bends under the weight of rejection, it isn't kindness. It's fear wearing a smile. Seneca once said, "He who seeks to please everyone pleases no one. To live by the crowd's praise is to live as their servant. To live by principle is to lead yourself." Think about this. Every empire that collapsed began by caring more about its image than its foundation. People are no different. When appearance replaces truth, the structure rots from within. That's why the Stoic practices detachment, not from people, but from their approval. Detachment doesn't mean coldness, it means independence. It means loving people deeply, but not needing their validation to keep standing. Picture a sculptor chiseling a statue from stone. Each blow removes something that doesn't belong. Approval is the excess marble. The Stoic carves it away until what remains is honest form, character untouched by the noise of expectation. The sculptor doesn't ask the crowd if the statue looks right. He knows when it feels right. That's the difference between living to impress and living in alignment. There's a kind of peace that arrives when you no longer perform. The world may not notice you immediately, but your actions gain weight. You become consistent, grounded, dangerous in your calm. When others panic to be seen, you remain unseen but unshaken. That's what frightens the crowd the most. A person who cannot be manipulated by approval, because they cannot predict him. And what cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. But make no mistake, detaching from approval doesn't mean isolation. It means standing within yourself with such steadiness that connection becomes genuine. When you don't need others to fill you, you finally have something real to offer them. The Stoic's presence is quiet, yet magnetic, not because he seeks attention, but because he radiates integrity. People may not always like him, but they cannot ignore him. Let me tell you something I learned through failure. The first time I refused to bend for approval, I lost friends. The second time, I lost opportunities. The third time, I lost the version of myself that needed either. And in that loss, I gained something irreplaceable: clarity. Freedom isn't granted when people accept you. It's earned when you accept yourself, completely, flaws and all. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, the approval of others is a distraction. Do what nature requires. In that sentence lies the entire Stoic code. Nature requires truth, not performance. Action, not applause. The crowd demands your compliance. Life demands your authenticity. So the next time you feel unseen, remember this: your worth is not measured by the noise you make in the world, but by the silence you can hold without breaking. Walk into the room without trying to prove anything. Speak without trying to please. Leave without needing to be remembered. The fewer approvals you chase, the freer you become. The Stoic doesn't rebel against approval by rejecting it. He simply rises above it. He understands that the moment you stop seeking to be admired, you start becoming admirable. The man who can look at the world's praise and neither crave it nor fear its loss, that man has mastered himself. And as we move forward, we'll step into the discipline that sustains this freedom. Because detachment is only the beginning. The next challenge is silence, learning to command respect, not by words, but by presence. Advancing to the third chapter, picture a room full of voices, each one competing to be heard, each one louder than the last. It's a storm of noise, opinions, and reactions. Everyone's talking, but almost no one is listening. In that chaos, silence becomes the rarest form of strength. Because silence unsettles people, it forces reflection, it reveals truth. The Stoic understands this. When the world rushes to speak, the wise pause to see. There's a strange power in saying nothing, not out of fear but out of control. When someone insults you and you don't react, you expose their weakness, not yours. When everyone is desperate to speak and you remain calm, you become the one they listen to. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That's not just advice, it's a strategy for clarity. In silence, your perception sharpens. You start seeing patterns others miss. You begin to understand what drives people, what they fear, and what they pretend to be. I remember sitting in a meeting years ago, surrounded by people trying to prove their intelligence. Each voice layered on top of another, the air thick with competition. I said nothing, just listened. I watched how their tones shifted when they spoke to power, how their words changed when attention turned away. When the room finally fell quiet, someone asked for my opinion. I spoke a few measured words, slow, precise. The energy shifted, not because my words were brilliant, but because they were scarce. That's the secret most never learn. Scarcity gives value. The less you speak, the more weight your voice carries. Seneca once warned, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Silence isn't weakness, it's a weapon. It buys you time. It lets emotion burn out before it burns you down. In every conflict, the person who controls their tongue controls the outcome. Imagine being provoked in front of others. Someone mocks you, waiting for you to explode. The crowd watches, but instead you meet their gaze, calm, unbothered. You say nothing. The silence becomes heavy. They start to stumble, trapped by their own noise. You didn't win by arguing, you won by mastering yourself. A Stoic doesn't use silence to avoid life. He uses it to understand it. Marcus Aurelius would write his thoughts at dawn, in silence, before the empire awoke. He knew that reflection required stillness, that without quiet, the mind becomes a slave to reaction. Modern life has no space for that kind of stillness. We fill every pause with distraction, afraid of what we might hear if we stopped. But silence is where wisdom hides. It's where we hear the quiet voice of reason, often drowned by the world's shouting. There's a story I often think about. A soldier once asked a Stoic philosopher how to remain calm under insult. The philosopher replied, "Imagine you are a rock. Does the sea shout the rock into moving?" The soldier didn't understand at first, but later, on the battlefield, as chaos erupted, he remembered those words. He stood still. He survived, not because he fought harder, but because he moved only when it mattered. The Stoic silence is not absence, it's readiness. It's composure sharpened into strength. Every word you say either builds or burns, and every silence either hides fear or displays power. The difference lies in intent. The wise pause, not because they are lost for words, but because they choose precision over impulse. Silence is the mark of someone who doesn't need to fill space to feel significant. When you can hold stillness in a noisy world, you command respect without asking for it. The truth is, most people fear silence because it forces them to face themselves. That's why they talk endlessly to escape the discomfort of their own thoughts. But the Stoic embraces that discomfort. He knows that within the quiet lies everything he's been avoiding, his doubts, his ego, his truth, and by confronting them, he transforms them into understanding. When I started practicing this, I noticed something profound. People began speaking differently around me. They became more careful with their words, more aware of their tone. Not because I demanded respect, but because silence made them conscious. Silence is contagious. It slows the rhythm of chaos. It creates space for thought. And in that space, wisdom breathes. So if you want to outsmart the crowd, learn to listen until the noise reveals itself for what it is: fear, insecurity, ego. Let others rush to fill the void. You stay still. You observe. You'll find that what most people call confidence is just loudness without depth. The Stoic's confidence is quiet. It's the kind that doesn't need to declare itself. It's the kind you can feel. And remember this: silence isn't about muting your voice. It's about amplifying your awareness. It's about being deliberate, precise, untouchable. The crowd fears silence because it exposes what's hollow. The Stoic uses silence because it protects what's whole. In a world obsessed with noise, silence is rebellion. It's how you lead without commanding, how you speak without words, how you win without fighting. And from that stillness, we move forward to the discipline that anchors this power. Living by principles that don't bend to popularity and acting with integrity even when no one applauds. From here we step into the fourth chapter, where silence transforms into something greater: principle. The moment you begin to see clearly, you realize that the real battle is not against the crowd's noise, but against your own temptation to become like them. Imagine standing at a crossroad where one path is paved with comfort, applause, and imitation, and the other with solitude, truth, and integrity. The first is easy, filled with lights and company. The second is quiet, narrow, and often walked alone. Yet only one of them leads to peace. In a world obsessed with what is popular, living by principle is the boldest rebellion. Most people don't actually believe what they say. They believe what rewards them. Their values change with the crowd's approval. Their words bend with the wind. But a Stoic understands that virtue is not seasonal. It does not rise and fall with fashion. It endures. Seneca once wrote, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." That's the cost of living without principle. You're moved by every gust of opinion, never steering your own course. I once met a colleague who built his entire reputation on saying what everyone wanted to hear. For a while, he thrived. His name was on every invitation, his posts celebrated, his opinions safe. But when the tides of public taste shifted, he fell silent. The same people who once praised him now ignored him, and he had nothing real to stand on. Watching him, I understood something essential. If your values depend on approval, your collapse is only a matter of time. Principle is not about stubbornness, it's about alignment. It means living in harmony with what you know to be right, even when it costs you something. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple but brutal. The kind of simplicity that demands courage. Because in the moment when doing the wrong thing brings comfort and doing the right thing brings isolation, the Stoic chooses truth and bears the solitude like armor. There's a story about a craftsman I once knew. He built furniture by hand, slow, precise. In a world of factories, his way seemed outdated. People told him to adapt, to make faster, cheaper work. He refused. "If I must hurry, I will stop," he said. Years later, when the world's cheap products broke, his work remained. That's the essence of Stoic integrity, doing it right even when no one's looking, even when no one applauds. Because virtue, unlike popularity, is not rented, it's owned. Living by principle doesn't mean you'll never doubt. It means you act rightly despite doubt. It means when temptation whispers, "No one will know," you remember that you will. Your conscience is your witness. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's doing what's right, even when it hurts. And that kind of freedom is rarer than any fame. At times, you'll be misunderstood. People will call your integrity arrogance. They'll say you're too rigid, too serious, too different. Let them. The Stoic doesn't explain virtue to those who haven't practiced it. He simply lives it. There's a quiet dignity in not needing to justify your values. In a noisy world, your consistency speaks louder than their criticism. And that's what makes principle powerful. It's not loud, but it's immovable. When the crowd bends, stand. When the crowd flatters, listen within. When the crowd panics, stay calm. Because every time you act by principle, you build something that cannot be taken from you, self-respect. That's what separates strength from performance. The man who has principles can lose everything and still keep his foundation. The man without them can gain the world and still be hollow. There's a moment each evening just before sleep when the noise fades and you're left alone with your thoughts. That's when truth speaks. You can't lie to yourself in that silence. You know what you compromised, what you avoided, what you stood for. A life of principle doesn't guarantee ease, but it guarantees rest, the kind that no applause can buy. The Stoic's compass is virtue. It guides through storms and temptation alike. Every time you choose principle over popularity, you carve another piece of yourself into someone solid, someone trustworthy, someone free. Because trends come and go, but integrity never expires. The more you live by it, the lighter you walk, untethered by guilt, untouchable by opinion. And when people ask why you didn't follow, why you didn't adapt to the crowd's rhythm, you'll simply smile, because you weren't built to follow the noise. You were built to endure it. You were built to stand still when others sway. You were built to live by truth, not by trend. And from that firmness, from that unshakable core, we move into the next challenge, the discipline of protecting your energy and your company, of choosing solitude over noise, and learning that not every connection deserves your presence. Now imagine standing on a mountain at dawn. The wind is cold, the valley below still asleep, and the world feels far away. That's what discipline feels like, lonely at first, but pure. It's the summit where few arrive because most stop climbing when comfort calls them back down. Yet every Stoic who ever lived knew this truth. Freedom doesn't come from doing what you want. It comes from mastering yourself. Discipline is not punishment. It's clarity. It's the decision to live by choice, not by impulse. Marcus Aurelius woke before sunrise every day, reminding himself, "You were born to work as a human being. Why then be lazy?" He wasn't chasing perfection. He was practicing control. The discipline to rise before the mind invents excuses. The discipline to act without the need for applause. the discipline to keep going when no one is watching. I once met a boxer who trained in silence long after his opponents had gone home. No cameras, no crowd, just the sound of his own breath and the rhythm of his gloves hitting the bag. I asked him why he pushed so hard when no one would ever know. He smiled and said, "Because that's when I find out who I am." That is Stoic discipline. It's not about proving something, it's about removing everything that makes you weaker. Most people confuse motivation with discipline. Motivation depends on mood. Discipline depends on decision. The crowd waits for the perfect time. The Stoic creates it. While others chase inspiration, he builds structure. He doesn't need to feel like doing it, he simply does it. Because consistency, not emotion, shapes destiny. Epictetus said, "No great thing is created suddenly. Every act of discipline is a brick in the fortress of your character." But discipline is not harshness. It's compassion in its highest form. You love yourself enough to say no to the habits that ruin you. You love your potential enough to protect it from distraction. In a world that worships indulgence, restraint is revolutionary. Every time you wake up when it's easier to sleep, stay calm when anger tempts you, or listen when pride wants to speak, you separate yourself from the ordinary. I've failed discipline many times, missed days, lost focus, gave into comfort. But each time I returned, I realized something powerful. The goal of discipline isn't perfection, it's direction. To return even after falling, to keep moving even after doubt. To remember why you began, especially when no one else does. Seneca once wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." The Stoic knows this. So he narrows his aim, simplifies his days, and builds depth where others scatter their strength. There will be days when your mind whispers, "This doesn't matter." That's the test. Because discipline never shouts, it waits. It watches who you are when the world is quiet. Each small act, every early morning, every task completed without complaint, is a declaration that you are not ruled by weakness. Discipline is the slow transformation of chaos into control. When people see a Stoic, they see calmness, but beneath that calm lies structure, built one small decision at a time, the kind of order that doesn't come from luck, but from labor. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to be extraordinary. You just have to be consistent. The crowd burns out, chasing intensity. The Stoic endures through simplicity. So hold yourself to a higher rhythm. Don't wait for ease. Don't beg for motivation. Train your mind the way a warrior sharpens his blade, daily, deliberately, without fanfare. Because when life hits, it's not talent or talk that saves you. It's discipline. It's the quiet repetition that made you unshakable long before anyone noticed. And as we move into the final lesson, remember this. Discipline isn't the end of the Stoic journey, it's the foundation. What comes next is how that discipline turns into presence, how action becomes stillness, and how the quiet leader stands apart not by force, but by the calm authority of self-mastery. Entering the final chapter, imagine this. The storm has passed, the noise has faded, and what remains is you, still, calm, complete. This is where everything comes together. The questioning, the detachment, the silence, the discipline, all of it led here. To presence. The kind of quiet strength that doesn't demand attention, yet cannot be ignored. Picture yourself walking through a crowded street. People rush, phones glow, voices rise, but you move differently. Not slower, not faster, just deliberate. There's no tension in your step, no urgency in your eyes. That is the Stoic presence, centered amid chaos, detached but not cold, aware but not disturbed. Marcus Aurelius called it the still point within the turning world. When you master yourself, the world can spin as wildly as it wants. You remain anchored. I remember waiting at an airport once. The flight was delayed for hours. Around me, frustration filled the air. Complaints, curses, arguments. Yet, I felt calm. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood what Epictetus meant. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The delay wasn't mine to control. My peace was. That realization changes everything. You stop being a leaf in the wind and become the wind itself. Presence isn't loud. It doesn't argue or prove. It's quiet confidence that draws respect without asking for it. Seneca said, "To be calm is the highest achievement of the self." It's easy to stay composed when life is easy. True presence appears when everything around you loses its balance, and you don't. There was once a man in an office known for gossip. When rumors about him spread, everyone watched, waiting for him to fight back. But he didn't. He kept working, silent and steady. Weeks later, the rumor died. People forgot the story but remembered his calm. Years later, when chaos returned, he was the one everyone trusted. He didn't rise by reacting. He rose by remaining unshaken. That's the secret most overlook. Stillness is not emptiness, it's control. It's the power to decide when to act, when to speak, and when to let silence do the work. You no longer need to prove who you are. You show it by how little can shake you. When your peace is intact, manipulation fails. You stop reacting to noise because it no longer reaches you. A Stoic leads quietly. He doesn't seek control, he becomes control. His presence changes the tone of a room before he even speaks. He doesn't resist the world, he flows through it with direction. The crowd moves by emotion, he moves by reason. The crowd seeks recognition, he seeks virtue. The crowd shouts, he listens. The crowd chases, he stands still, and in that stillness he leads. When you reach this point, life becomes simple again. You realize most battles are invitations you don't have to accept. Most opinions are noise you don't need to answer. You walk away not from weakness, but from wisdom. Peace becomes the prize, not the afterthought. And perhaps this is the greatest Stoic lesson of all. Strength is quiet. Power doesn't have to announce itself. The more self-mastery you gain, the less you need to display it. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's how you stand apart from the crowd. Not by shouting, but by being unshakably yourself. Let your silence speak for your strength. Let your calm be your rebellion. Because in the end, you don't outsmart the crowd by fighting it, you outgrow it. You rise not by standing above others, but by standing fully within yourself. Quiet, grounded, free." If something in these words resonated with you, share it with someone who needs a moment of stillness today. And if you're learning to lead quietly, to think clearly while the world rushes by, subscribe and keep walking this path with intention. Leave a simple reminder in the comments. Stand apart. Remember, the goal isn't to fight the noise, but to rise above it with calm strength. Stay true to your rhythm. Your next step toward mastery begins in silence, and it starts now.